Hi, everyone, and welcome. We're so glad you're here. We're excited that you've joined us to explore how a community can improve early grade reading at scale, not just in one classroom or one schoolhouse, but across an entire city. Today, you'll hear directly from leaders behind Cradle to Career Muncie's community-wide effort to strengthen early literacy outcomes in Muncie, Indiana. We'll explore how their partnerships, strategy, and commitment to place-based work are helping more children read proficiently by third grade, and what other communities can learn from their journey. I'm MaKenzie Mosby, Network Advisor at StriveTogether. I have the privilege of partnering closely with Cradle to Career Muncie as they advance early grade reading outcomes and broader Cradle to Career outcomes in their community. In my role, I support their team through strategic thought partnership, resourcing, and connections across the Cradle to Career Network, a national network of community partnerships working to ensure every young person has a clear path to economic mobility. Today's conversation is about Muncie's work, the strategies, partnerships, and systems they've built to drive results in early grade reading. We're joined by an incredible group of leaders who steward the early grade reading work in Muncie. First, we have Dr. Charles Reynolds, Director of Education and CEO of Muncie Community Schools. Heidi White, Director of Elementary Education and Pre-K at Muncie Community Schools. Kelsey Harrington, Program Impact Officer at George and Frances Ball Foundation, Cradle to Career Muncie, and Kortney Zimmerman, Vice President and Chief Program Officer at George and Frances Ball Foundation, Cradle to Career Muncie. Throughout the live, we invite you to drop your questions in the chat. We'll be monitoring them and answering as many as we can in real time. To get us started, I'd love to turn it over to Kelsey to share more about Cradle to Career Muncie and before we dive into the discussion.
Thanks, MaKenzie. And I'm actually going to tag team with my colleague, Kortney. And so, Kortney, I'm going to turn it to you to give the group kind of a rich background in a short period of time before we dive into some quick wins.
Thanks, Kelsey. So give you a little background. The mission of Cradle to Career Muncie is that we're a collective impact initiative focused on overcoming generational poverty by raising the level of educational attainment in our community in order to better equip our citizens to earn a good living income. And the backbone organization for Cradle to Career Muncie is the George and Frances Ball Foundation, which is a 90-year-old place-based family foundation here in Muncie. And discussions of Cradle to Career Muncie actually started back in 2018 when our board of directors wanted to take a more proactive approach to grant making. So George and Frances Ball Foundation staff started researching the 70 Cradle to Career communities in the StriveTogether network to figure out what are other communities doing, how are they doing this work, and what would be some strategies that we could implement here. And so give you a little bit of a level set of our community is we are a Rust Belt community, and we have a population of about 112 people in the county. And in the city of Muncie, we have about 70,000 people with multiple school districts within the county. But based on our data, because we are data informed and data driven, we started looking into disaggregated data. And that really told the story that we really need to focus on Muncie and Muncie Community Schools. So we became really hyper-focused on specific census tracts within Muncie that feed into the Muncie Community Schools district. And so at the same time, George and Frances Ball Foundation was looking at taking a more proactive grant-making approach and focused on creating bigger impact. Locally, Muncie Community Schools was facing some unique opportunities, which I'll let Chuck and Heidi kind of touch on that a little bit later. But it was kind of this perfect storm that started gaining momentum, and we have about 150 individuals involved in the work, and we're mobilizing the work through Collaborative Action Networks, or CANs, and we have Collaborative Action Network leaders who lead each CAN and CAN members involved and committed to helping move the needle forward on our Cradle to Career outcomes. But to truly move the needle, it takes a community-wide cross-sector approach, and none of this would happen without our community partners in Muncie Community Schools. And so I'm going to pass it over to Kelsey to give you some updates on some wins we've had over the past few years.
Thanks, Kortney. And earlier I referenced them as quick wins, more like we're going to go through them quickly, but they were not accomplished quickly. So here in a second, I'll focus more in on our early literacy, but here at Cradle to Career Muncie, we're celebrating accomplishments like a 10% increase in graduation rate, at high school since our work started, major improvements in absenteeism and attendance, and major improvements when it comes to behavioral outcomes for students, which as a result really translate to our kiddos being in the classroom more than they were maybe a few years ago. So all that very exciting, but actually the work in our community on grade level reading as a community-wide effort really started back in 2014 when our local United Way turned their focus to the importance of grade level reading and what grade level reading does in order to set people up for lifelong success. And so they really set the foundation in our community from an advocacy standpoint and otherwise to where more than maybe the average person would know about the importance of literacy, which truly has helped our work thereafter. And they continue to serve as our collaborative action network leader today, bringing our partners together around this particular topic area. They also helped us imagine our very first site learning experience, which we're going to get into later. But we took about 10 people to Philadelphia to look into their grade level reading work. And that really also set the foundation for what ultimately turned into our journey to the science of reading. In addition to the district being a recipient of the largest school improvement grant in the state of Indiana, which was focused on driving change in early grade literacy by creating pre-K spots at the district and funding the transition to science of reading, in addition to a number of other strategies that were supported by that grant. Overall, we've been able to stabilize enrollment, increase teacher pay and retention at the district, and together collaboratively, Cradle to Career Muncie and Muncie Community Schools established an education data outcomes team that is uniquely positioned at the district. And so our network-wide data team that services the school and community partners has that unique structure of being at the school. And we're going to get more into data because it's so important to us. But that has led to a number of really exciting wins, including tracking down some data that helped us understand that intra-district mobility was really high, and that one of the ways that we could change our system to help our students succeed was by creating a district-wide common school schedule for our elementaries, which predated some of our curricular transitions that supported early grade literacy outcomes, but were really important nonetheless. Lastly, I'll just share that we launched a public awareness campaign modeled after Philadelphia's work and featuring local kids and families, pushing the importance of early grade reading in our community throughout our neighborhoods with familiar faces. And all of these things and more ultimately led to our conversation today, where we're excited to share that we have increased our reading proficiency by about 10% in 1 year.
Incredible work. I am so excited for us to kind of move through this conversation with kind of that hindsight is 2020 vision to think about where you are now and to really pull down those insights and lessons for our audience and for our network members as we move through this conversation. And to appreciate you for naming some of those wins early off the bat. I would love for us to kind of thinking about that hindsight is 2020, kind of go back to the beginning, thinking about you coming into this work, and would love for you to share how you came to this work and really thinking about what sustains you to keep going. So Kortney, if you kick us off, then we'll kind of move through learning a little bit more about your whys.
Yeah. So my why is I'm born and raised in Muncie, and spoiler alert, the whole panel is too. So that's exciting. I didn't want to steal their thunder, but had to share it because we're proud of that. And I get the privilege of working with the George and Frances Ball Foundation. I have the honor of being part of the backbone team for Cradle to Career Muncie, but a title I really love is the title of mom, and I get to see my son grow up along the Cradle to Career continuum and what we're developing here locally. And so as a resident and lifer, this is both professional and personal for me, and I get to give back to a community that raised me. And another why is that schools can't do this work alone, and they shouldn't. They shouldn't have to do that by themselves. So I always bring that lens into the work. And there's a stat that states a student is awake approximately 6,000 hours a year, and only 1,000 of those hours are spent in school. And that's if they have perfect attendance. And so the other 5,000 hours are spent in the community and with their families. So Cradle to Career Muncie is charged with supporting those students and their families in those 5,000 hours. And how can we help reinforce what's happening at the school and bring that into the community and out of school time? And also, just as a previous educator, I'm just very passionate about this work.
Thanks, Kortney. Kelsey, want to bring you into this conversation too. And then Chuck and Heidi, please share just a little bit about kind of your why and what sustained you going on in this field.
Absolutely. So we're working from cradle to career, and at the latter end of that, we talk a lot about work-based learning and career readiness, that sort of thing. And I actually joined this work first as an intern, a college intern, studying philanthropy, and almost 8 years ago now. And one of the things that drew me in was the opportunity to work and give back in my hometown. But one of the things that has kept me in this work is a passion for creating and seeing real impact in a community that I believe is so deserving of the best. And when I first came into the work, I remember us looking at community-wide data, life expectancy, poverty, income, health outcomes, those sorts of things, and looking at data about the assets that we have. And Muncie is actually one of the most generous communities in the state of Indiana per the Sagamore Institute, which is a statewide think tank. And yet we have some of the most sobering outcomes at a people level. And so as someone who's passionate about working smarter and collaborating and using those things to drive real change, I'm really passionate about the role that philanthropy has to play in making that place-based, sustained change.
Absolutely. Chuck, would you mind sharing a little bit with us?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again for having us today. Much like Kelsey and Kortney, it's extremely personal and professional. I grew up in probably one of the poorest census tracts that we serve in our community, and just a walking example of how education can transform a life. That's become a passion, not only a profession, but a passion to go out, give back. And then I have the best job in the district. I get to see the impact of all this work in our classrooms every day, where folks might feel a little overwhelmed or that they're not making a difference. My seat as the CEO, and most commonly called the superintendent in districts, boy, I get to see just the miracles that are happening every day, and specifically related to literacy in our littlest learners too. So definitely not only a profession, but very personal. I graduated from the community schools, came back and spent most of my professional career here within the school district. And my kids, one kid has graduated. I have another one that is about to graduate in May. So again, very, very personal to me, and a walking example of what a tremendous education and really focused on literacy can do for folks.
Hello, and just to kind of sum up what everyone else has already expressed, because I think we all have very similar sentiments. Again, I am a local Muncie resident, and this community has also shaped who I am and who I am continuing to become on a daily basis. Coming more from the school perspective, you know, literacy is a civil right, and every student absolutely deserves the right to read. Because reading opens doors, whether that's to opportunity, to confidence, to their future. It's opening up doors for our kiddos. And this work is my way of ensuring that our students are not only learning to read, but are also empowered to shape their own future endeavors as well.
Yeah. Thank you all for sharing. really pulling at some of those threads of the importance of education and the impact that it can have on a student and a family and kind of their future and what they're able to achieve and really kind of opening up a window into your personal life. Kortney sharing that you're a mom and Chuck sharing about your family. So just really appreciate you all sharing there. And want to kind of dig into, Kortney, I love how you describe yourself as a lifer for Muncie. And so we know, and that really does underscore the belief and the truth that we know that place really informs how we do this work. And so would love for y'all to just tell us a little bit more about what makes Muncie unique. Really thinking about, you shared a little bit about how the work got started there, but anything else that you want to share to the audience and to the group?
Yeah,
So
yeah, I can go ahead. I really think it's important to understand our community a little bit, to understand where we started and how we've evolved as a community. Of course, we're in the Midwest. Midwest is known for the manufacturing in the small, mid-sized cities like Muncie. Like most of those cities, that manufacturing has left our community. Um, Community really felt the hit of the loss of all that industry and really took advantage of that opportunity to reinvent itself. I would say that was not easy. Typically, trials such as that brings a community together. Certainly, a gritty community to try to reinvent itself. Years and years and years of just tremendous jobs and opportunities. If you left one job, you could walk across the street and get another high paying job the next day or that same day. And those opportunities were not there anymore. So the communities, the community really rallied behind reinventing itself. And that seemed to focus around the neighborhoods and the schools within those neighborhoods. They were really rallying points. And when if you check out the Cradle to Career website or our website, you'll see that the community is really divided up into neighborhoods. We're only maybe 2 or 3 zip codes in our town, but we have a lot more neighborhoods that the community is divided into. So we were able to leverage that sense of community, resiliency, and grittiness that the community has within those neighborhoods and rally that around the school district. And that was going very well. I think the community was okay. We were rebounding from the manufacturing. The school district was okay. And then the school district started to falter. We had some leadership turnover, some changes in legislation and taxing structure, and it really impacted our community quickly. The schools didn't react quick enough to that. And in 2018, we were in a really tough spot. The school corporation was close to a state takeover for financial reasons and soon academic reasons. We're right behind that. So that gave us a turning point opportunity for our school district and our community. Cradle to Career Muncie was being born, and the school acted as, like I said, a turning point to rally the voices of the community. We took time in 2019 to do a listening and learning group of sessions that was led by one of our partners, United Way. And along with the school district and Cradle to Career Muncie, we gathered input on what our community really wanted to see out of our school districts, the hopes, the dreams, the expectations. So it really created a renewed sense of community within our school districts, and our neighborhood schools were a rallying point for that. So maybe just to give you a little snapshot on where we were and how we got there, and the kind of that tipping point where we had to do something, and the school corporation and the community got together to be that tipping point.
absolutely. And I think what I'm pulling through is really thinking about how this moment of urgency around we have to, do something around to sustain our schools really turned into this broader movement that is Cradle to Career Muncie. And so hoping to pull some learning and insights through as how y'all were able to do that because, moments of crises don't always turn into that kind of long-term sustained movement, but you all have been able to do that in community. Um, Kortney, anything that you wanted to share about the uniqueness of Muncie and what makes it an incredible place?
Yeah, I'll share a little bit more. It's going to sound very similar to Chuck's response, but when I describe Muncie or think about Muncie, we often describe it as like it's big enough to have this kind of larger city feel, but it's small enough to be able to wrap your hands, really your arms around what's happening. You can get involved and you can feel like you're making an impact. You can really start to see, how your little part of the work is making a bigger impact. And so I mentioned before, so George and Francis Ball Foundation wanted to make a bigger impact. We were looking at ways to contribute to the community beyond grant making, which led us to the StriveTogether network. And so really the first 3 months of Kelsey and I's job was to study the StriveTogether communities and the networks and what were these other communities doing. We were researching, kind of figuring what's it look like how are they doing this work? And so we started diving into like some of these communities that had been doing this work for 20, 30, 40 years. I mean, it's long game work. And so it was nice to be able to find communities that were, on the same path so that we could learn, what's working there that we could bring back to Muncie and carry out. And another just amazing part about our Muncie community is it's so giving, like Kelsey mentioned before. It's full of leaders and individuals who are doing great work. And when Muncie Community Schools was facing their unique opportunities, like Chuck mentioned before, the community really rallied around the schools and supported them. It was like, okay, what can we do? And rallied around that partnership between Muncie Community Schools and Ball State University. And it was that in that sense of urgency, right? We felt this, like we have to do something right now. And so we didn't have time to wait. It was a sense of urgency. But looking back, it was really that beginning of the movement. Like you mentioned, MaKenzie earlier, it's this movement. And what happened to the schools that caused the reaction was really just a small taste of what can happen when a community comes together.
Absolutely. And Chuck, appreciate you providing that historical context because it really does give us an opportunity to peek behind the curtain and kind of see, because we are here celebrating the wins that you all have had in the last couple of years in early grade reading, but that historical context lets us really understand that the journey hasn't necessarily been easy, and it hasn't been easy. And so I'd love for us to kind of think about y'all's vision for the work and kind of where you are now and where it is that you are headed through kind of talking about your strategic plan. So we know that you Cradle to Career Muncie recently launched its 5-year strategic plan, the Opportunity Blueprint 2030. Just tell us a little bit more about that vision that you're holding for 2030 and how early grade reading fits into that broader vision. Kelsey?
Sure. I love what Kortney was just saying about the sense of urgency that was created. And while the school was certainly putting together their innovation and strategic plans, the community movement was really just trying to, in real time, align itself to what the school was doing. And so with that being said, we didn't have a separate plan. And that might be what makes our first and new strategic plan, the Opportunity Blueprint 2030, unique, is that the work was happening well before this plan was created. But it was finally time to take what we'd learned, take the progress that was made, and build out this bigger vision and put it on paper. So that this collective of over 150, not only 150 collaborators in our work, but actually 150 authors of the plan. And for anyone watching the call, if you look up our plan on our website, you'll see in the back all of the different individuals who played a major role in helping us build this vision. But that said, really this the next 5 years, this next era of our work is shifting us from a mindset and a vision standpoint from educational attainment and educational attainment initiative, which is really how all of this started, to more of a focus on it being a living wage economic mobility movement. And that shift really matters because to us, it represents that bigger picture goal, the true why behind our work. Heidi mentioned that believing that third grade reading and reading literacy in general is a civil right. And we had to kind of ask ourselves, like, why are we so focused on all of these different markers? It's not just because education is great, which it is. It's because we fundamentally believe that it is the key that can unlock a brighter future for everyone in our community and beyond. And so that said, our third grade reading work really had maybe the most developed plan for a lot of different reasons, including the school improvement grant that I mentioned earlier, the school's innovation and strategic plan, et cetera. And so the third grade reading work from the past and also looking forward really served as a great example for the rest of our work, which there are 8 other work groups, as they thought about building their plan. So third grade reading kind of built its next era of the plan, and everyone else really used the work of third grade reading as a model. And so we're really excited about the plan because we think that not only it helps our internal work as a network move faster and smoother, but also it helps tell our story to others.
So I'm curious how the early grade reading work got started. So we've heard some of that context around there was this moment of urgency and not necessarily save the school, but kind of intervene in the presence of kind of the state takeover. And so, I'm curious what were some of those sparks for the early grade reading work specifically in Muncie? Heidi, if you want to share.
Yeah, absolutely. So as Kelsey had mentioned earlier, some of this work had already started prior to our school takeover. United Way was a big advocate for early literacy in all of our schools and our spaces and providing our families with the text to have in their home libraries and strategies along the way. So this work really started years and years ago. But with that, we just saw that, like most people, with COVID and when it hit, it was a reality check for us that what we are doing is not working for our students, and we owe our students better than what we are currently providing. We were using a balanced literacy curriculum, which we now know is not the approach that we should be using. So we actually took to the science of reading a solid year and a half sooner than many of the other districts in Indiana. Some of that stemmed from, again, the peer learning trip that a group took to Philadelphia with George and Frances Ball Foundation and leaders from our community and our school. And all of this just kind of fell into place from that moment. Soon after that time, we were awarded the school improvement grant, in which we created an educational transformation team, which we refer to as ETT. And that ETT was made up of community members. It had our principals on it that were serving in those schools, but it had members from George and Frances Ball, members from Ball State, the YMCA, United Way, By Five, which is our birth to K initiative in Muncie as well. So all of those pieces came together, which then really, again, catalyzed that work to even propel even more forward at that time.
Yeah, that's just really helpful to kind of draw that through line and really think about all the assets that community had and how it was really this perfect, not necessarily storm, but this perfect mix of the right people at the table, kind of the right posture of community, and the right folks leading the work, calling back to the United Way, really starting some of this work. And so I'm curious to kind of zoom out from Muncie. There has been, there was, and there still is a lot of national momentum around improving early grade reading proficiency. And so I'm curious how you all engaged in that national momentum. You've mentioned a couple of different peer learning visits that you had. I'm curious if there's others that you want to mention or dive deeply into. And then the other piece that I'm curious about is what did that momentum look like from a policy perspective at the state level? What kind of policies was the Indiana legislature or the governor, or kind of the Department of Education passing and mandating that really created that momentum in Indiana?
To get to the Indiana specifics, it really started back in 2012 when legislators, like many educators, were picking up on the national momentum of early grade literacy. They created a team, sat down, created the third grade reading assessment. Went through a few iterations, but it was always a focus. So almost 15 years now that we've been working on that assessment, and the requirements of who takes the assessment and retention and all those pieces have kind of ebbed back and forth. But that assessment has been probably the truest assessment that we've had in our state. We've gone through iterations of other grade assessments, but that iRead 3 in Indiana has been steadfast since about 2012. So I think you can see the hard work that was put into creating that, the validity of the test, the care that they take when soliciting feedback about the assessment. I think is something you can attribute to the Indiana Department of Education on. As far as our national trips, we've mentioned Philadelphia. We recently went to Vero Beach, Florida, on an early grade literacy initiative, which was a fantastic trip. Been to the Harlem Children's Zone to work as well. Relatedly, I think that we've also been to Nashville to see the high school academies and how that relates to early grade literacy and preparing students. Went to Steubenville, Ohio, and did a visit there, and also I'm leaving one off. It is Wisconsin. It is
Racine.
Phone a friend. Racine. I'm sorry. Thank you, Kelsey. Racine. To see, and I tell you what they all have in common. There is a focus on early grade literacy and all of those places, and also an embedded community presence in the schools and vice versa.
Yeah. And what I love about the approach that you all take to peer learning is you really understand it and see it as part of kind of that research and data, the data diving to really understand what's happening around us, what can we learn from others, and what can we kind of adapt and adjust to implement in our particular context. And so appreciate you sharing about those peer learning experiences and some of those policy pieces that were kind of in place and foundational to your work. Accountability is really how we get to the intervention. Some of those accountability pieces, the having those kind of state tests, or how we're able to do some of those necessary and needed interventions for students. So appreciate you uplifting both of those pieces. And so I'm curious now specifically about your strategies. So what strategies are Muncie Community Schools leading and implementing to support the kind of increases that you're seeing in early literacy reading, or early literacy proficiency, excuse me?
As Kelsey mentioned earlier, one of the first things that we did, again, was recognizing that the mobility of our students has a huge impact on our student learning. And so creating that common schedule where every first grader in the district is reading from 11 to 12:30, and they are on this unit, really helped make sure our students were not having any gaps when they did move. So that was one of the first strategies that we did use. Another part of the when talking about policy and procedures, the state of Indiana initiated the Indiana Literacy Cadre approximately 3 years ago. And that has also been very crucial to a lot of our success. So the Indiana Literacy Cadre is a professional learning group for our master teachers who then come into our buildings and help model, support, co-teach with our classroom teachers as well. And that strategy has worked very well for our teachers coming in, just to have that support right there in the building that they can ask questions to, that they can learn from. But again, that key piece is that modeling component and learning walks that we are using where our people are learning from one another, which is a great place to be. With that, I will say we've had several other school districts also come in to see the things that are taking place in our spaces because we do have that momentum. So we are trying to also share that wealth with others to say, hey, this is working, would you like to see what we are doing? So that's been another piece that we have had, that not only are we peer learning from others, but now we have people that are peer learning from us. And we are also always learning from the individuals that come to visit us as well. So there are a lot of different pieces. Another big piece when looking at the out of school partners, as Kortney mentioned earlier, if kids have perfect attendance, they're in school 1,000 hours, but then they're out of school 5,000 hours. So we have been partnering with a lot of our out of school partners and training them in the science of reading, not so they can duplicate what we are doing in our space, but they can take their programming and incorporate science of reading into their programming, whether that be the YMCA or the Boys and Girls Club, or we have some different community organizations, the Ross Center, that we are trying to work together with. So we are using our resources and our toolbox to hopefully continue that science of reading in that additional 5,000 hours outside of the classroom.
Yeah, this dual approach, right? There are these curricular in-school pieces that, of course, are going to accelerate that reading proficiency. But thinking about that out-of-school time, and I love that stat that you all are sharing around the number of hours that students spend outside of school. And so there are some strategies that we need to be focused on, and some factors that we need to address around that literacy access. And so I'm curious. Chuck, if there's anything else that you wanted to share, or anyone else around some of your work in the literacy rich spaces, your access to book work, to really round out that picture for us of your inside of school and out of school strategy.
Yeah, I can't say enough about our out of school partners. That was certainly evident. We attended a StriveTogether convening, and this is only my second year in this role, so I didn't get to go on all the other trips or the convenings. But boy, when I went to the convening in Utah, it was great to connect with other programs and hear about other StriveTogether network schools and organizations. But boy, I also recognized from those convenings, not only did I learn, but I recognized how just rich we were in our organizations. It's just really hard to put into words the importance and the efforts and energy that they have given to our community organizations to support our students. And I tell you, one other piece that we have taken for granted is our data team. So we're always talking about data. When you're working with funders and looking at impact of effort, everyone always wants to know how are you doing and how are you measuring that. So as a school district, and teachers and administrators, you always think you use the data pretty well. Hey, I know who needs to pass. I know what where their gaps are, but it is so much more than that. And a data team really helped bring that to light for us. So just to give you a little insight on our district, we repurposed one of our information technology team. Instead of that person just being a student information system and being a manager of of where we house all of our student information and managing that, they became a data analysis. They helped organize data, tie data to student data, to achievement data, attendance data. They worked really hard to do those pieces for us. In conjunction, we started working with the Georgia Francis Ball Foundation to create a team. So that individual was busy enough trying to meet our needs of our district, but let alone trying to look at community partner impact. So through funding through Georgia and Francis Ball, we were able to create a little team, a team of 3, but to provide data impact for those community partners, which I didn't realize was such a stumbling block for so many networks and community groups, right? There seems to be a wall between student data and partners. And by us bringing that data team in-house, that really opened up a lot of doors to get that data. So, our community partners, the Boys and Girls Club, the YMCA, other smaller local groups, the United Way, and the funding that they provide, they were able to see the impact of their work. They could see when they offer these after-school programs, they could see that cohort of students. They could see, well, on the days they have it, their attendance is better. If they've sustained through the program, their literacy scores improve. So that internal data team piece has made a tremendous difference. And I also think it galvanized our community partners, because then they could wrap their hands around the impact that they're making with our students.
Another strategy I would like to add to that too, that completely spaced it, and I think it's just because we're in the work every day, but in 2018, we had 2 pre-K classrooms across our school district, and we are now currently at 13 pre-K classrooms across our district, because we see that catching and capturing these kids as early as 3 years old will also have a huge impact on those 3rd grade readability. And so that is a piece that has been absolutely monumental in those same strides. And I completely spaced it, so I apologize for interrupting.
No, please, as those things come to you, please share, because we are all super eager to learn from the success that you all have had. And Chuck, I appreciate you sharing about some of those data tools and kind of the data infrastructure that you all have built to support the early grade reading work. We can talk all day long about what we're doing, but the why around why we're doing it really comes from the data and identifying where are the gaps, and where do we need to kind of focus some of these interventions. So appreciate you kind of sharing with us what you all have developed. And as always, y'all jump in if there's anything else that you want to name around some of those data pieces. But I'm curious. Oh, Kelsey, I see you.
MaKenzie, if you don't
Yes,
mind,
please.
my teammates here are just jogging my thoughts and memory around kind of like what's next, like what as the school continues to do their great work, what else is gonna be front and center in our community work, according to our plan and what our partners have identified. And so really, I think that those things can be summed up into 2 buckets. One is proactivity. So to me, that's part of, that's the data that's helping us understand, okay, not only did 80% of the students at this after school program pass iRead 3, but maybe looking earlier at kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, what are the specific skills that students that organization serves maybe need extra support in. So using data to help us be even more proactive about getting into like the nitty gritty of what students need, but also reaching our students earlier. And then I think about that family piece. I know we keep saying the 5,000 hours, but really our community partners under the leadership of United Way are every day learning different ways to create more literacy rich environments, so that basically wherever students go, be it the grocery store, the laundromat, the park, they are seeing and have access to words and language and books, and that their caregivers, their trusted adults around them feel equipped to support that learning in a really intentional way, and have the tools in their toolbox to understand what the reports that come home with the kiddo actually mean, or how they can continue to be their child's first teacher, which we believe at our core is the truth. So those are some of the community type things that, in collaboration with the school, we are looking at now and into the future.
Yeah, appreciate those additions. And I think through our conversation, you've really highlighted the role of partners. We've talked about the United Way. We've talked about the role that the school plays. We've talked about the role that family plays as the child's first teacher, and really thinking about how they support their learning. But I'm really curious, and our audience, we have a mix of folks. We have folks who are backbone staff, we have folks who are partners, a true mix. But I'm curious how you all see your role as the backbone, Kelsey and Kortney, to support this early grade reading work. We know that you all aren't doing the direct service part of this work, and so how do you understand your role in supporting this work for it to continue to be successful?
Absolutely. So both as a backbone and as a local funder, I would say that our team is uniquely positioned to kind of cruise at the 10,000 foot view. And there are pros and cons to that position, in terms of there are things that we can't see as closely, and there are things that that we can see differently because we're not as close to it, perhaps. But an example of that would be seeing lots of different partners and the system from a different perspective gives us the opportunity, when in relationship with community partners, to really advocate for, convene around this idea of not just collaboration and partnership, but true alignment and systems transformation in our community, where everyone is doing what they do really well, but doing it towards a common goal. And we believe that we have a role to play in helping storytell that and help engineer it alongside others, because we can spend every day telling the story, trying to find resources to grow the pot that's supporting the work that's happening here, calling specific partners together to have exciting conversations, to have tough conversations, but really playing that like quarterback and cheerleader role of the work. And ultimately, I think that, we've talked about the site learning experience piece, but that's another really important role that we try to play. Muncie is, again, like a bigger community, which for some people on the call might hear 70,000 people and think, oh my gosh, that's not a big community at all. But in our area, it is. But it's also small, and sometimes it can be easy to kind of not only put our heads down organization by organization, but put our heads down as a community and not kind of look up and look around. And so one of the roles we play as a backbone is really trying to connect research and experience from other communities, some that are like us and some that are different than us, and bring those learnings either into our community or bring our community into those spaces, so that we can not just rely upon our own understanding or knowledge, but really prioritize both that content and context expertise being applied to the work that we do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm curious, so from that quarterback role, really thinking about convening partners together, who else is sitting in this, in the early grade reading can? Who are some of your other partners? So we've talked about Muncie Community Schools, we've talked about the United Way. I'm curious who else is at that table, to make sure that you have the right folks at the table.
Yeah, there's definitely a mix, and we'd be happy we can get the full list, because I'm probably going to leave some people out. So I'm sorry, but anyone we have a Minnetrista Cultural Center here locally. We have the Muncie Children's Museum. We have Muncie Civic Theater. We have a Boys and Girls Club, as mentioned before. We have a local charter school. So it's kind of a mix, and I do think we have that captured. So we'd be happy to send that out of who all makes up the third grade reading can. But I wanted to touch on a couple things too with Heidi had mentioned this, and maybe Heidi, you were going to say it, I'll let you say it if you want, but you asked about the role of the backbone. And one thing we didn't mention, Heidi reminded us a couple days ago, is really this work started with a Promise Neighborhood grant. And so and the Department of Education releases Promise Neighborhood grants every year, can be up to $30 million. And that was really the first time we put thoughts on paper and figuring out like, okay, how do we really want to move this work forward? And we kind of brought in like a team huddle, like with everyone in, like, no matter what happens, if we get this grant or not, this work is going to happen no matter what, because that's what's best for our community and our students. And I think that was a catapult too for the work. And so that was a great way to really pull in data and get ecosystem partners and really think through, okay, what does this look like, and what can we create here locally? We talk about the data team too. I can't stress enough how big of an asset they are now to the community and able to pull real-time data. And I don't want to speak for the schools, but a lot of times data is lagging. And so you're looking at data that's from maybe weeks or months ago. And now we can look at real-time data, and Heidi and Chuck can make, real-time interventions and real-time decisions. So that's been a really big change for us here locally. But I also want to make a shameless plug. So after this call, I know everyone's going to have access to the Opportunity Blueprint 2030. And we are, again, big advocates for continuous improvement. So when you have some light reading time tonight or over the next couple of weeks, because I think it's 68 pages, we want to hear from our network partners and others. So if there are things in there that you're reading and you're like, hey, we've got a really cool strategy that's happening here, you say we're going to do that here in Muncie, we'd love to connect. We want to make it better. And we're all working together, right? We all want better outcomes for our children. So if we can work together as a network, as a community, as a nation, like, please, we're happy to have those conversations.
Yes, Heidi, I was going to say, yeah.
To circle back to the backbone component of what their role is, from an outsider's perspective, to me, it's about that collective impact. So I always refer to that graphic where the arrows are just going every direction, right? Every organization has good intent and has the best interest at heart. Open Door, Meridian Health Services, United Way, the Boys and Girls, they all have good intentions. But to me, the backbone of George and Francis has been that one like singular force that is getting all of our arrows to go in the same direction. And it's just been very impactful. Another thing that I really just like to echo about our backbone is that they are a support for us and a support for our community. And what I mean by that is they're not coming in here and telling us what to do. They're not telling us that we should do it in this way, but they are saying, how can we support you? How can we support early reading? Hey, we saw this in our research. Would you like to go see it? Absolutely. And they come, and I know Kelsey kind of referred to that higher level perspective, but they're alongside of us too, which I think is very impactful for the work too. I know Kortney brings her son to several of our events that we have. And it just, to me, that makes it that whole community feel again, right?
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing from the perspective of a partner how the backbone can support this work, because I think sometimes it is important for us to know how the backbone is coming off and how the backbone can be most supportive. And so I appreciate you sharing those pieces. And Kortney, never a shameless plug. We are here to learn from you all. So any resources that you can share that will extend our own learning from this particular conversation, please do so. We did have some curiosity from a member of our audience. How long did it take you all to come to that strategic plan? We know that you engaged 150 folks, the entire community. So really give us a timeline of how you came to that plan.
Yeah, happy to take that one. So as was mentioned, our local United Way really started championing this work more than a decade ago now. And we started convening our collaborative action network 4-ish years ago. The pandemic makes it kind of more complicated than a straight timeline. That said, to build out the 5-year plan that we have now for all of the plan across each of our collaborative action networks, it took 6 to 8 months. So we first convened about 100 partners in February of last year, and the final version of the plan was launched at a celebratory event in October. And so there was a lot of work that happened in between, and we made the decision locally to facilitate the build out of that plan at the backbone level. So our staff dedicated time and energy to convening the partners and kind of building the plan, and then helping make sure that that got translated into the document that you can see and find today. But that was really the timeline. And so we are following basically a school year model for our years. So as we imagine what a year of that 1-year plan is, we're aligning it more towards that school calendar.
Very helpful. And I think one of the learning pieces to take away is that you all aren't stopping there. You really have built out a robust system for what it means to implement and activate this plan through your CAN work groups, through community, through your partners. So I encourage you all to dive into that strategic plan. I tell you, time flies. We are almost at an hour. And so really quickly want to leave folks with any advice that you have for folks who are listening in, who are thinking about implementing some of these place-based strategies in early grade reading. What advice do you have for them? Chuck?
Yeah, our school district and our community was really at a tough spot. I would say don't wait until you're in a really tough situation before you start implementing strategies. Create a sense of urgency. I think you've heard that a couple of times on this call. Create a sense of urgency, not a sense of panic, but a sense of urgency that early grade literacy is important. Our kids deserve that. It's a civil right that they are well equipped with good literacy skills, but certainly think that's what I would recommend. Get started early. Don't wait until you're at a tipping point. Create a sense of urgency in your schools and your community and your partnerships to really lean into into this work.
Thanks, Chuck. And an important kind of call to action. Any other advice?
I will just add, this has also been touched on multiple times, but as a place-based partnership, it matters at the initiative level, it matters at the organizational level, that we are really listening and responding to our community and what the community's hopes, dreams, expectations are. And we believe that there is a role for bold leadership to take what data and research says about what works for kids, and what research and data says about what helps people in the 21st century access good paying jobs, and therefore have access to better health outcomes, better life expectancy, better quality of life, and find a way to build that coalition of the willing, and kind of take a hold of that leadership and not be ashamed to say, like, hey, what we're doing isn't working. And it really matters that it works because this is what's on the line, which I think is the urgency that Chuck was describing. And so anyway, every day we're battling that balance between responding and listening, and also having the courage to share what the data says, and be open to trying to lead that conversation around what we can do to kind of marry those two important things together.
What an absolute reminder to lean into collaborative improvement. The process works, trust it. And when something is not kind of shaking out how we hypothesized it would, go back to the table with the people who we've brought around the table, the right folks, the people we trust with community, to get it right. We are at time, but I don't want to cut off any of the rich nuggets that Heidi or Kortney, you may have to share with our audience.
I agree with everything Chuck and Kelsey said. I'm just going to be short and sweet. You know, you got to put your foot on the gas and you can't take it off. I mean, we talk a lot about that urgency, like Chuck had mentioned before, like it's go time, and just knowing it's long game work and you can't take your foot off the gas.
And I would obviously echo all of their sentiments as well. The one piece that I always have to try to remind myself is that, as Kortney said, this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. So when we go on these visits and we see, you know, very wonderful, wonderful things, I have to reflect and say they've been doing this for 25 years. Heidi, we've been doing this work for 7, right? So that's always something just to keep in the back of mind. But you've got to get started somewhere. So you got to take that first step.
What a way to round this out. I have my running shoes on, I'm lacing them up, and I'm ready to run alongside you all and our entire Cradle to Career network as, you know, we continue to engage collaborative improvement processes to seek these outcomes that we our students and families in our community deserve. Well, thank y'all so much for joining us today, everybody, and a very special thank you to Chuck, Heidi, Kelsey, and Kortney for bringing the fullness of the Muncie community into space with us and really sharing your insight and commitment to improving early grade reading in Muncie. You can continue to engage with Cradle to Career Muncie through a StriveTogether blog that details their work in early grade reading and by reviewing their 5-year strategic plan, the Opportunity Blueprint 2030. If you and your team are looking to make an impact in early grade reading, please turn to the StriveTogether Early Grade Reading Playbook to get you started. We'll share all those links in the chat if you'd like to learn more. And of course, please stay connected with us at StriveTogether and the Cradle to Career Network by taking courses in the Training Hub. The Training Hub provides easy to access, high quality training, grounded in proven approaches and tested by leaders across the country. Courses to build leaders' capabilities to work across sectors, change systems, and improve outcomes. Learn more and register for a course at the link below. Thanks again so much for joining us, y'all, and have a great day.